Hi there, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Ryan McCombs, and as always, make sure to hit the like button on this video, hit subscribe, and follow me on X at RAMccombs326 so that I can keep you updated on the issues that matter most. With that, I'm going to get right into my monologue for tonight, in which I cover a multitude of topics, the first being immigration, and what both political parties in this country do not want you to know. The progressive left's open border policies have been met with strong reaction from many on the right. However, as tends to happen in our culture, what begins as righteous anger quickly turns into collectivist hate. Where conservatives call for targeted enforcement of our border laws for the sake of national security, far-right isolationists call for mass deportations, grounded in racism and bigotry. My party, the party of Ronald Reagan, celebrates Latino culture and the culture of anyone willing to assimilate and contribute to American society. The populist right, by contrast, demonizes anyone that doesn't fit their own racial profile. They aim their vile, unhinged bigotry most severely at Latinos, Jews, and blacks. The progressive left and the populist right are both born of the same flawed political principle, and that principle is collectivism. It should come as no surprise then to find that both of these groups employ the same logic. Both groups are infected with rabid anti-Semitism and seek to discredit Israel's right to exist securely as a Jewish state. Many of these same voices would allow Putin to steamroll Ukraine and President Xi to take over Taiwan. Although they talk a big game about keeping our own country secure, they compromise the security of the entire free world by being indifferent to the affairs of the world. As a traditional conservative, I wholeheartedly reject the extremism and grievance-based policies of the far right. Now, I began writing this monologue on a plane ride the other day, and I could go on and on about immigration, about the philosophical debates that are taking place in both major political parties right now. I wrote about it extensively in my debut article back in January, Traditional Conservative. I've talked about it on the show with my episode about populism and socialism. But I would be doing a great disservice. I would be committing a grave miscarriage of justice if I did not take a moment to honor the late and beloved United States Senator Lindsey Graham. The conservative movement has truly lost a giant. Lindsey Graham was a defender of the Friends of Freedom on the world stage, and he is admirable for that quality and for so many others. It was Graham who, as a young man, raised his own sister, all by himself, following the tragic passing of their parents. It was Lindsey Graham, the patriot, who served as a defense attorney in the United States military, ensuring due process for his fellow servicemen and women. It was Graham, the idealist, who led the charge for criminal justice reform in the United States Senate, at a time when doing so garnered criticism from members on both sides of the aisle. It was Graham, the Christian, who authored and proposed the Protect Pain-Capable Unborn Babies Act, one of the strongest pieces of pro-life legislation in our nation's history. It was I, yours truly, who delivered his first ever academic political presentation on that historic piece of legislation. For his unwavering commitment to the timeless principles of traditional conservatism, Graham was a constant target of both the progressive left and the populist right. But Graham never, not once, allowed such sinister voices to impede upon the work that had to be done for his state and for our country. And for that we owe to him a great debt. I am very fond of Lindsey Graham. I believe him to be a consequential United States Senator, and that is why I am particularly disgusted by many of the comments I am seeing online disparaging the memory and legacy of this senator. And that includes a professor from my very own college, St. Bonaventure University. Unfortunately, one of our political science professors, Dr. Ibrahim Zabad, decided to make some very disgraceful and utterly despicable statements concerning the late senator on Twitter. Zabad called United States Senator Lindsey Graham a bigot. He said that he was anti-Muslim, and he concluded the message by saying, "Rest in hell." Now, I'm not sure why Dr. Zabad thinks that's an intelligent thing to say. I don't know why he thought that was a moral thing to say, but it's neither one of those things. It is, as I said, despicable. So let's clear up a couple of things. Lindsey Graham was not a bigot. In fact, he was one of the most fair, hardworking, and respectable members of the United States Senate on either side of the aisle. Secondly, he was not anti-Muslim, he was anti-Islamist. And I've said many times before that a critical distinction has to be made between individual Muslims and militants. Graham was against Islamism. He was against militarism. He was not against each individual Muslim. And finally, whatever it is that made Dr. Zabad think that he could wish hell upon a man who has just passed, at a time when his family is grieving, at a time when our movement as conservatives, when we all are grieving the loss of, once again, a consequential senator. It speaks volumes to the moral decay of that professor and of the university, because this is not the first incident. If you've been keeping up with St. Bonaventure, you probably know about the Gavazzi incident. Emma Gavazzi, the SGA president, who celebrated openly and proudly on her Snapchat story the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So this is a pattern, and I would hate to see the university handle this situation the way it did with the Gavazzi situation. I impeached Emma Gavazzi. There was no hearing, nothing. What they chose to do, instead of having a hearing, instead of doing an investigation, is they waited for her to skip 3 SGA meetings so that she would automatically be deposed from her position. And who replaced her? You think they had an election? Of course not. They appointed her VP, who was just as bad, if not worse. He might have been even more incompetent than her. So this is a pattern of deflection, denial, and even endorsement from St. Bonaventure University. And the hatred spewed by Gavazzi and by Zabad needs to end. We need an end to that rhetoric in our country, and we must, all of us, on both sides, recommit ourselves to civility. And that is the bottom line. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to tune in to Friday's episode.